Welcome back to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is where we blur the lines between business, nonprofit, and impact. I'm your host, Wendy V, and I'm a social impact strategist here to help you build a successful and sustainable legacy of social change. In this week's episode, we're going to hear from a social entrepreneur who has been on a journey to change the world just like you. If you are interested in social entrepreneurship, this is the place for you. Let's jump right into this week's episode. Hey everyone, welcome to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. I'm super excited today because I get to talk to one of my friends from FinCon, the Financial Content Creators Conference that we go to every year to learn more about how we can up-level our game as finance creators. And I had the best time talking to David Delisle. He was just hanging out at the podcasting meetup and I said, "Who are you and what do you do?" And I came to find out that he helps a lot of people with their ability to share financial literacy with children, and doing that through his own book and through a lot of different vehicles that he's been using in the last year. It's really inspiring to see how David is on this journey to help us help the next generation. And as we talk about a lot with sustainability and how we can make the world a better place, it all is about how do we make the better place for the future generations. So this is a direct episode about that concept, and I'm super excited to invite David to the show. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about what made you write a children's book, and who are you, and how did this happen for you?
So many questions. I'm excited to be here, Wendy. I mean, we met at FinCon. I am a finance nerd. So I started getting into finance when I was like 11 and reading books by like Peter Lynch and about stock markets and value investing. So I've always been a finance nerd. But I've realized most people aren't. And so I've been investing for, over 30 years now, being a finance nerd. And I've got two young boys, and they're getting a little older, so it was sort of at a point where I was like, just want to pass down some lessons to them. And I realized that a lot of the lessons I want to pass down were around money and finance, because I look at it a little bit differently than most people. And then in doing that, it just evolved into this book. I was volunteering at my children's library, watching all the kids reading graphic novels, and I saw how much excitement they had just reading these graphic novels, and I realized, like, here's something where I could take something I'm passionate about but most people aren't, put in a format that people will get, and just deliver this message in a fun way. Because I think that's the thing, is when we think of finance, most people, they start thinking like charts and money and macroeconomics, and I mean, I do as well because I love this stuff, but that's overwhelming for most people, and really it's not that difficult. And so I tried to simplify it into what's the mindset, what's the habits, and to be honest, the rest doesn't really matter. So it is a children's book, but to be honest, it's meant for adults. It's just the adults don't get it, so I want to teach the kids so they can teach the adults.
It's almost like a vehicle that the parents and the young person can come into this conversation with the assumption that the young person is the one learning, but really the parent is going to go on in the journey with them, essentially.
For sure. And typically that's what happens. I mean, the parents come in just easy, they're just reading the book, and then I hear back from them, "Oh my God, I just learned XYZ, or I should be doing this, or I didn't even think of things that way," because it's just basic habits, and that's really what's important. I mean, those habits when it comes to finance and the mindset around it, I mean, that's like 95% of it. And I think that's the thing as well, is when I was trying to reflect on what I wanted to teach, it was a bit of a wake-up call for me, because I've overcomplicated things because I love it so much. And if I just simplified and made things a little bit easier and stopped thinking about money as much and put it on autopilot, the savings, the investings, everything else, I would have probably done just as well, and I wouldn't have had all that stress. So I realized how much of it is noise, and we get in our own way most of the time.
Yeah, and if you're trying to then do something for your children, you're going to pass down your habits. So it's like your children are definitely going to learn, your style of managing money versus maybe the best way they could, or even something that's helpful on autopilot. So I could see how that would translate really well into, a book comes in, an experience comes in that you do together, and then the habits could co-change, or at least the young person will know there's another way to do things.
For sure. And that's the thing, is it's just bringing that awareness. So trying to take away so much judgment, because there's so much sort of feelings and judgment, and there's a right way and there's a wrong way when it comes to money. And this is just, no, here's some ideas. Here's another way of thinking about it. Doesn't mean it's the right way, but it's another way. And really my goal in a perfect world would be someone would read the book, follow the habits in the mindset, and get to a point where they don't think about money at all. I mean, that's my goal. Like, to me, that's financial freedom, is not thinking about money at all.
Yeah, not having like the burden or the worry, or, and that's a complete shift of money mindset for a lot of people, to not worry about money. Because, and I think I had heard this stat like recently, where it was only 42% of people have some sort of worry or anxiety around money. And I'm like, that seems really low. I feel like it's like 100% of people at some point have experienced that. So to put things on autopilot, make it easier for yourself. That's a great tip. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what is the awesome stuff, and why should parents be teaching this to their young children, or to their young people? Because I think that some parents might just not even think that this is something they need to actively teach.
Yeah, so with the book, so basically in the book, a young boy goes on a journey and learns, really only 4 key lessons, golden rules of money. And the first lesson is only buy the awesome stuff. And the reason that's the first lesson, and this is a really important lesson, and really why I'm doing this at all, is this is basically focusing on why you want money in the first place. Because everyone, when we start talking about it or learning about it or teaching it, we're always wondering how to have more. And there's nothing wrong with having more, but if it's the only lesson we've ever learned, it doesn't matter how much we achieve, we're always still chasing more, because that's all we know. And the awesome stuff gets you back into what really is important to you as the first lesson, and just the basis and the framework for everything else. And what's really fun is even 5-year-olds can get this, because when you hear it, even as adults, I'm sure we're like, I know what my awesome stuff is, I know what I want to buy next, I know where I spend money. But it's a little bit more than that, and it's just getting in touch with really what lights you up. And like, if I started talking to someone, you should feel it in your body. It should be one of those things that you get really excited about. And same with our kids. So they might say, oh, I love, Pokemon cards, or I love Lego, or I love trucks. And so they just want more, and all of those that they can get. And as parents, we get that. But even with those kids, there's the one thing that if your house was on fire, or you're on vacation and you left something at the hotel room, there's that one thing that the kids would just lose it if they lost. Like, that is the thing that means the most to them. And as adults, we're the same. So it's really getting in touch with what that is, and then recognizing that it's different for everyone. So it's a fun conversation to have as a family, because then you can start talking about what your awesome stuff is for you and your family and everyone. Like, I mean, I'd be curious to know what your awesome stuff is for you, Wendy.
Oh man, for a long time I thought it was my bike. I think like my bike is one of those things where I'm like, oh no, I really need to get it. But then I stopped riding it as much, so it kind of like devalued itself. So now I'm like, oh my God, my awesome stuff is probably my hard drive that goes with my business. Because if I don't have that in a fire, I'm really, really screwed. but that's no fun. So I'm gonna go back to the bike. But yeah, no, my hard drive is not my awesome stuff. And I think that it's an interesting concept, because it invites you to really focus in on the embodiment of your things, right? Because sometimes we just have things around us, and even if you're like on the hoarding spectrum, you have like a lot of things around you, but people might buy stuff and it doesn't necessarily have any sentimental value or any meaning. But what you're kind of saying is, well, there's meaning in some of the things that we have, and if you connect with it, you'll notice. And that is a really great tip. Are there other tips in the book that for parents that you want to just share with the audience?
Yeah, real quickly on the awesome stuff though,
Yeah.
like some of it's not just about getting in touch with the things that you really love as well. It's just noticing how much those things do bring you happiness. And in recognizing that, realizing the things that don't bring you happiness. Because what we don't realize is the more stuff we have, like, it all has a cost. Like, the obvious cost is financial. And so it's something that you could spend money on instead. but it also takes up time to buy that item, time to maintain it, takes up headspace. Like you said, like if you're a hoarder, there's you've got to store this, and then it's around you, so you see it. So there's a distraction. Like everything has a bit of a cost to it. So once you start recognizing what really makes you happy, you also recognize what doesn't make you happy, and so it just sort of streamlines your life towards what really lights you up. So that's what gets fun with it, and it can be experiences as well. It doesn't have to be things, but I just want to make that point.
Yeah, no, that's great.
But then getting back to parents, I mean, one of the easiest things we can start doing with our kids is just talking about money, because we tend to not talk about it. It's one of these taboo subjects. We're always worried about it, or we don't know what to say, or maybe we don't want to teach them the wrong things. But at the same time, like a common value most parents would say that they want to teach their kids is the value of money. Like that's what they're wanting, like how to save and the value of money. But the thing is we don't tell them how much things cost. We don't talk about money. So there's absolutely no way they can learn the value of money if they don't know how much that burger cost, or how much the gas costs, or your vehicle, or your house, or all these things. So just having a conversation of letting them know how much things actually cost, and talking about money in that way, and not in a judgy way or a guilty way. Just, hey, when we go do this thing, we went to the fair, this is how much it costs to go to the fair, this is how much it costs to go to the movies, and just letting them be aware of what those things cost. And then in their own minds, they can start equating, okay, a movie costs this and a bike costs this. The movie feels like a rip-off to me because I'd rather have the bike, or whatever it is. Like, they don't even have to have the conversation. Just knowing the value of things starts to teach them the value of money.
It reminds me of one of my friends. She told me the other day her daughter said, "Oh, well, we can buy that. You have a lot of money, Mom." And it was really funny because her mom was like, if she only knew, how much it costs to live. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. It can be a perception of, I don't know what it costs to buy something, but it also could be a perception that you have infinite money, parent, because it just comes to you magically. I don't know how, I don't know how much. And I'm sure we also don't tell kids how much money we make in order to pay for those things too, because that's also been, kind of taboo. So that's an interesting concept of letting kids into the door of even how much does it cost.
Yeah, and it just starts that conversation, and they can start valuing things. So when we take them to a fancy dinner, for example, or spend a lot on, a vacation or a flight or any of these things, they can start equating it. They start understanding, like, oh, like my Lego's only $20, but this meal just cost, $200. And for like a little kid, like that's like mind blowing, and they'll be like,
Yeah,
"Why we
yeah,
spent
yeah.
so much money on that food?"
It was only one plate.
Exactly, and just having those conversations, and then that brings you back to that conversation around the awesome stuff as well, because it's really about values and what brings you happiness. So then you can start seeing, well, what is important, like as a family, as individuals, why are we spending this on different things, and just those conversations. It suddenly opens up the door to a lot more, and really starts having these conversations, because otherwise we just don't know. And I think if we don't know, then what we're looking at is like social media, commercials, TV, or stars, and then we start being taught money by all of this perception with no fact behind it, and get caught up in dreaming about something that we don't even know why we want it. It's just the only thing we've ever been taught. So this is just another way to teach another side of things.
And I think with the happiness part, you were talking about experiences. I know some of the times that I wouldn't be able to take them with me if there was a fire, but some of my most treasured experiences are traveling and seeing the world and experiencing, different cuisines, different cultures, like all of those types of things. So yeah, those would be very valuable things that would always go with me as memories. But I can't necessarily take them if we had an emergency. So I think those would also be part of my awesome stuff list. And I know that, you've been talking about this book. This book has been a big part of your life, and I really want to explore, have you been able to see, what impact you've made by writing this book or going through this process to teach people these skills? What have people told you about the impact that you've had on their lives?
Yeah, it's really fun because it is that awareness. So with the young kids, they pick up all sorts of different things. So I know there's kids where they'll read the book, and as soon as they read it, all of a sudden they're like, okay, for my birthday, this just happened at FinCon. It was so cute. A little boy read the book, and then the next day told their parents, and they mentioned to me and did a post. Their son wanted money for their birthday so they could invest it and start up, a savings account. And it was just so cute because it wasn't. The book is very, very easy in the sense of it doesn't say do this or do that. It just provides information on, compound growth and the idea of saving and what money can become and your awesome stuff. And so that this young child just extrapolated from that. And I get a lot of parents as well. Like the awesome stuff really lands with certain people because they start recognizing where they've been spending their money and how that's not really what's important to them. So you hear from people like travel or freedom, like financial freedom. They don't want to work at their job or more time with family. But then you look at the spending habits and they aren't in line with what really is their awesome stuff. So it shifts things, even recognizing what is important. Is it, the clothes, or is it that second vacation home, or is it retiring 5 years early? Like just that awareness. I notice that really lands with a lot of people. And so that's really fun. And just kids getting it. I mean, if kids start, the thing is kids have time on their side. And that's what we know as money nerds, we get that time is so much more valuable when it comes to investing and accumulating wealth than anything else. So we might try to, overthink it and figure out, what investment's going to have the best return and how much should we be saving, all these other things. But as a young child, if they start reading this and learning these concepts at like 10 or 15 or even 20, then they're set up for early retirement, money not being a big thing. Like you start these habits in your teens and 20s, and it doesn't take much, 20, 30 years, and you can achieve financial freedom. So it's pretty fun hearing those stories.
Yeah, and it's a transformation probably for some families who wouldn't even think about financial freedom as being an option or something that they would, be able to pass on to the next generation. So I'm sure that makes a big impact too for whoever is going to be in that family in the future. If you have someone who has been able to achieve financial freedom and does have good investments and they pass it on in the right way to, somebody in their family, that really does build the legacy part. So that's awesome. And I think the part that you mentioned about that, what makes you happy, is really important too, because people connecting to that idea of happiness being achievable, it gives hope that your life can be transformed. And so, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Like, what does that looked like? Being able to show people that you can be happy, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend more money.
Yeah, it's just that focus on what's important, and that's what's so great about this concept, because it's not about being frugal or cheap or budgeting or doing without. It's recognizing what does make you happy, so you don't feel like you have less because you start recognizing that. So a simplest example that I would use is like as a parent seeing a young child, begging for ice cream. And as parents, we're always stuck. Like, do we say yes? Do we say no? If we say no, do we say because it's too much money, or you just had this, or we don't want to spend? Like, we don't know what to do. But if we're thinking about what really makes you happy, and we've already had that conversation with our kids, even the 5-year-old, we can put back on them, is that your awesome stuff? And that same child will stop, they'll reflect, and they'll think about it. And at that point, it doesn't matter if they say yes or no. It doesn't really matter what the answer is. The fact that they reflect on, is this something that really will make me happy? Or did I just walk by and see everyone having ice cream and I thought I wanted to? And it just shifts everything, because then they start, asking themselves, and as adults as well, like, what does make you happy? Where are you lit up? What does get you excited? Like you mentioned the hard drive, which isn't very sexy. But if I dug a bit deeper, I'm sure it's because it's linked to the show, the impact you're having, the people you're talking to, and I bet suddenly all of a sudden you'd light up, you get excited, and be a whole different conversation because you've recognized like that is important to you. It's not the hard drive, it's what this impact is, or what this thing is to you. And that's the thing, is once you start recognizing that, it's really hard to feel like you don't have enough, or if only, or you start throwing in the shoulds, because you can feel in your body when you're when you're happy, when you're not, and when you're doing what you're excited about, and when you're not, and once you start recognizing that, it shifts everything from looking for more to buy to doing more of what you love.
And it's funny that you mentioned the hard drive again, because I was giggling to myself that what's on the hard drive is also, besides all of my stuff that I do adore related to the show and my clients, is all of the pictures of my travels. And so when I was talking about the travels, that's a direct connection between where the travels live in the memories and the hard drive. And I was laughing. I was like, "Ooh, David did dig right into the source of this thing." It's really awesome. I love it. And we keep saying awesome in this episode. It's just hilarious because it's so true, right? Like there are certain things that are triggers for you of like, "Oh no, that really does represent happiness in my life." And so the tangential things around it also kind of represent that too. And I love that idea. And I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned this, connecting with family and spending time and, having that time to be able to do that. How do you balance, what you're doing as a social entrepreneur, trying to get the book out and anything else you've got going on in your professional life? How do you balance that with being a parent and your family and your own well-being as an adult and a person? What does that look like for you with your routines and just what you've had to do in your self-development journey?
It's gotten a little trickier. So usually I've been very good at creating a lot of space to do those things that I love. So for myself, like I've been semi-retired since 40, so I've had a lot more space. But then this book and this passion and teaching has sort of taken over something that I do love so much. So I find it could easily consume all of my time, and more than all of my time, because there's so many ways to sort of get this message out, build a platform around it, do the speaking, do the marketing. Like there's no end. So it can feel a little overwhelming. But for me, like my awesome stuff, I love doing stuff with the kids. I love being able to volunteer at the children's school. So even the other day, like I was there, they had like their a sushi day, so I was able to like volunteer as a parent and gather all that together, or I'll volunteer in the library or outdoor field trips. So I try to make those the number one priority and then build things around that. And so lately it has gotten a little trickier, but I do try to figure out like what are those things that are really important and focus on like those number one. I think I do tend to try to lean back on when I'm really feeling overwhelmed is this idea, I believe it's Pareto's law, it's that 80-20 rule, where like 20% of your happiness comes from 80% of the things you're doing, or 80%, like it's just a ratio. But a lot of times it's most of what you're doing comes from very little. So actually I had it reversed. So it'd be like 80% of your happiness comes from 20% of the things you're doing, and you could do it like 90%, 10%. And so sort of trying to recognize in all those areas, like as far as impact, what are the 10% of the things I do that'll have the 90% impact, or what are the 10% of the things that I do that have a 90% return on my happiness, or same with friends. So I try to play with that a bit and try to really focus on the things that really do make a difference, but it can get a little overwhelming. I do a meditation as well. Ideally it would be a daily meditation practice. It doesn't always happen as the case, but I find, and I don't know if this is a thing with money nerds, I mean you can answer this for me as well, Wendy, but I find for myself anyway, I'm very in my head. And so I'm always, I'm cerebral, I'm thinking in my head, and that's not really where the, happiness is, or just enjoying life is. You really want to be in the present. So that's where the meditation practice really does help me sink into the present. Being around the kids and volunteering with them really allows me to sink into the present. So as much as I can just be present and not in my head thinking about the future, that always helps with the balance in general.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just money nerds. I think there's a lot of people, and I know a lot of people even in our community of the Social Impact Level Up Collective have told me, because I try to offer meditation to the community, and I'm like, guys, this is a really good deal. Like, here, come get a free meditation, come like hang out and just chill. And people are just like, I cannot meditate. I cannot turn my head off. And then we have to go into a conversation of like, well, what is that about? Then we get into the whole coaching thing of like, let's talk about what's going on with you, that you need to turn your head off eventually. But how do you do that? And I think that you brought it up as well. When you start going and following your passion, things get exciting, but they also can get overwhelming really quickly if you're really working in that space of that nexus of like, I'm working on my passion, I'm excited about it, and I know there's so much to be done and I'm motivated. It's easy to lose sight of, the other things that ground you, like meditation or time to yourself or nature or any of those things. And I don't know if you've ever experienced that part of it before, but the excitement is really what fuels the forgetting about the other routines that help you.
Exactly, and you do need those routines. And I will say with the meditation, because I was one of those people where it was extremely difficult. Like even when I first started meditating, it was like so I do transcendental meditation, which basically you just repeat a mantra that they give you over and over. And so when I first started doing it, it was almost like just because my mind would wander, so I just like focus as hard as I could, just mantra, 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 like just trying to like not think of anything else. And that's not what meditation is. You're going to get a headache, you're going to hurt yourself. Meditation, your mind is supposed to wander. It's that, but as it wanders, you bring it back to the present again. And it's that bringing it back to the present, that's the entire exercise. So it doesn't matter if your mind wanders the entire time. It's just that act of getting into the habit of bringing it back into the present. And over time, it gets easier and easier. So you'll find yourself just in daily life not always being so distracted and thinking of the next thing. And I mean, so here's a good example. Here's a fun story. I just recently went with my boys to Disneyland. And I don't know if anyone's going to Disneyland post-COVID, but
I have not since 2018.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like we live on the West Coast in Canada, but we're close to Anaheim and LA. So we go to Disneyland a lot, or we did pre-COVID. And I've been going for years, and just the crowds, the lineups, the chaos, everything's more expensive now. Everything you have to book over again. Like you have to book the park just to get into the park. You can't just show up anymore. Like everything's just chaos. And so I went there with my boys, and the first day, like it was overwhelming. I was like, I'm not coming back. This is too much. And I like to still have fun, but it was one of those trips where, I'm here in Disneyland, happiest place on earth, and I'm forcing it. Like I'm making it fun, but it's an effort. But then when I finally got to the point where it's like, I let go a little bit more, I cared less. It didn't matter if there's lineups and there's crowds, and we're not going to do everything. Just be in the moment. Just my boys are young. Every trip with them changes. So like these moments, I'll never have these moments again with them at this age in Disneyland, enjoying the rides they are, and just that excitement and the crowds. Yes, there's that, but the parades and the music and the food, and just letting go of everything and just being more present. It shifted. All of a sudden, like that anxiety dropped away, the stress dropped away, just the anger of even being on the trip dropped away. Like it just started becoming a really fun trip. The more I let go and the more present I was. And I think that's a good example, because there too, like you're thinking about like the next ride and how to get in the rides and where I'm going to go next, what I'm going to do for food. Like it's overwhelmed. But as soon as you drop all of that, it was a much better trip.
And heaven forbid somebody need to go to the bathroom in the middle of all of that, because then that like derails the whole plan that you had. Oh no, bathroom.
Oh, we had this middle of the lines, and like you're dragging, like exiting a line, and you just have
yes, the whole thing.
It's chaos.
So I grew up going
Meltdowns.
to Disneyland, so I know exactly what you mean, and I can't imagine it now.
It's crazier because everything now that you've got these tighter windows. You got to book a certain way. Even when you hop parks, you can't hop parks till after 1:00, even if you have that park hopper pass. Like it's chaos. But again, like ignoring all the chaos of it, you can look at it as chaos and chasing and trying to like, how do I jam everything in? How do I do everything? What are we doing for dinner? How do I book the next thing? And just racing, or slow down, be present, enjoy the moment, and just appreciate it for what it is, because there is some real magic there in those moments. And I think that was a good reminder for me anyway.
Yeah, because you never want to be in the happiest place on earth and you're like, I'm unhappy. And I have been that person before. I am notoriously not the person to take Disneyland, just FYI, because I get anxious around all of that. And me not having kids, I don't even know what to do with strollers coming at me. So when multiple strollers come different directions at me, I just stop like a light post and I'm like, ah! It's hilarious. And I know that last time I went to Disneyland, I thought the same thing. I was like, gosh, there's so much pressure to just exist here. Like, to go through the day in your brain, you're like, I want to see this, I want to see that, I want to go to this parade, I want to do this, I want to go to pulling the sword out of the stone, like all the things I'm trying to get to, and they happen at this time, and I got to walk super fast to get there, and it's stressful. And so I could appreciate the approach of just like letting go of all that, and just like what is what is today. And I know I'm going to spend a bunch of money. I know I'm going to wait in line and stand for a long time, and that's okay. And I can be happy in that, even with all those things going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's a really good example, and I think really it's a metaphor for life. Like that's what I found. Like I was there. Like I teach all these things, I talk about these things, and still I'm getting
It's
all
so
anxious,
true.
and I'm running around like, well, why? Like, just slow it down, and we had a great time. We didn't maybe go on the rides that we really wanted to go on, but we went on ones that were enjoyable and had food that we wanted and had a nicer pace and just did some really cool things. And just noticing, I think that's another good example of how quickly things pass us by because we're thinking of the next thing. And Disneyland's the same thing. We're thinking of the next ride, we're thinking of what we need to do, like the Sword of the Stone thing or the next parade or the next event, instead of just recognizing like what's right in front of us. And that's getting back to the awesome stuff. So when I think about this whole thing, I describe it as a journey, because it's not like a destination where like you get there and you finally achieve everything you want. It's no, like the whole just life itself, recognizing what there is, what you're enjoying, what you're doing, where you're putting your effort, and slowing down some of that pace. And that's why I find the whole finance stuff is so important. The money stuff is because for a lot of us, we're just on this pace of just maintaining a lifestyle. So we have to achieve a certain amount of money to maintain that lifestyle. We're constantly chasing. And if we just dial back just a little bit and create a little bit more space financially and in terms of time, all of a sudden like we'd have that breathing room and really recognize like what we do have. I mean, wherever anyone lives, I'm sure you walk out your front door, people come there on vacation and tour that, your town, your things, and explore, and we take it for granted. It's right there in our backyard. So
Oh yeah, I live in Washington D.C. So I am the tour guide when people come here. I don't go to the touristy things because I know I'm going to go when somebody comes to visit. And it takes me a while in between things, like if something opens in between major visits of family and friends, for me to like go see the Museum of the African American Natural, or any of the Smithsonian's, anything that's open in the last couple of years. I've gone only when people come. And I live here, so I could go on any weekend. Like I could go see the Martin Luther King like Jr. Memorial like anytime, but I just don't, right? And so I waited until my family came, and then I went and saw all of it at the same time, and it was like this rush from here and rush from there. And so it reminds me of your Disney example, because it's all around the same area in DC, and so you got to like walk across the mall in different directions to get to the different things. And I remember just being like, this is kind of exhausting, right? And why didn't I just come here on a like average Saturday? And I don't need my family to be there. I don't need friends to be there. I could just enjoy it. And so I appreciate what you're saying. And I think the happiness part is from collecting those memories and collecting those experiences. And yes, it is sometimes, we're worried about money or worried about all these other things as we're going through it. But there's tons of ways to live, very, like you said, it could be frugal. It could be one way to say it, but also to just enjoy yourself and live. And you don't have to have that pressure of money fueling it. And I think even with areas like this in DC, you live in Vancouver, right? I mean, that's actually a pretty big city. In those areas, it costs a lot to live. Any of the major cities, it costs a lot to live in everywhere now. And you were mentioning the inflation in Disney. I think that also kind of has helped people understand that I do need to invest differently in the things that make me happy, because now everything is more expensive. And I don't know if you've noticed that as well, in talking to people, but it is kind of difficult now.
yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where we're not there yet, but the other shoe's about to drop. Like it's almost like there's been this huge allowance over COVID where people could just, you know, there's all like governments and people and everyone, it's almost like, okay, well, we're in the middle of this pandemic, money's going to be tight, so just borrow and it's fine. And the government's going to give you money, so it's fine. And nobody has really had to think about or worry about their finances. But as we come out the other side of this, there's going to be massive amounts of debt on an individual level plus a government level, and it's going to hit all at once. At the same time, inflation's catching up. Younger generation is not used to high interest rates, but what we've had the last like the decade and longer has been extremely low interest rates, which is going to have a massive impact. Like all these things are happening. So, you know, our the next generation kids, like they're the ones who are going to suffer unless we start teaching some of these habits now, because the world's just exploding in a way where it is going to get extremely expensive to live, and we just
It's not going to go back down.
Like, it's not going back down.
No, and I notice this every time I go to the grocery store, and I cringe, and I'm like, can we just go back to like when this cost $2 less? Like I was already cringing at that level, but it was tolerable. Now when I go in and I'm like, my yogurt is $2 more, and like that's not okay with me. That means like, do I really need yogurt? Like, you know, and then there's these other questions that you have in your head, and I think you're right. It's going to eventually be, everybody will feel this, including, you know, the younger generations, but they will have to burden it for more of their life than those of us who are now adults and are like, ooh, oops, you know. That's unfortunate. But I mean, nobody expected to have a pandemic, and I think that how we navigate our way out of it and still manage to take the lessons learned and apply them and try to make change or try to help other generations, you know, think about, well, what if this happened again? You know, did we even document all of the lessons learned yet? I'm not entirely sure we have. So going, like you're saying, teaching kids how to like kind of make the future a little bit easier to navigate with skills, you know, that might be one answer to that.
Yeah, no, I think it's the next generation is going to have to get a lot smarter about money, and that's where all these conversations, they just dovetail into each other. So the habits of saving, that's going to set them up so they have a little bit of a buffer. The conversation around the awesome stuff is going to allow them to focus on what's really important, and then a lot of us as well is going to be just adjusting that lifestyle inflation that we all have. And if you recognize, if you just dial that back just a little bit, then you have that space to do these things that you love, not feel tight, weather a pandemic, have your money, you know, creating wealth and growing for you. And it feels hard to do that, but for everybody, it doesn't matter what income you're making or what you're earning or what your lifestyle is. We're almost to a person living to the maximum of our lifestyle. Like that's just what we do. If you have more money, you move into a bigger house, or you buy a bigger car, or move into a more expensive city. It's automatic. So if we just recognize to dial that back just slightly, and that's the space that we create, and then as we create more, we still, you know, we can still buy more and do more, but still maintain that space.
Yeah. And
that's what I want to try to teach the kids, is maintain that space. Then you're never living paycheck to paycheck and really stuck, because for almost everybody, if you're making $100,000 a year or $1 million a year, a lot of us are still living paycheck to paycheck because we just increase our lifestyle to fit into that new budget, and that's scary. And it's the poor next generation. I mean, they're going to be the ones servicing this debt that we've created, and
yes,
it's going to affect them.
And they're going to have to go into their own debt too, just to be able to get to where we got to, which is, you know, the student loan stuff is still going to be part of the problem. So all of that. Well, my light has now gone off, which now means apparently it's time to go. I'm like, oh no, I didn't realize it was on a timer. Sorry, y'all, lighting changed. But I wanted to just check in with you before we end. Where can people connect with you if they are interested in the awesome stuff? Like, where do they acquire this wonderful book that we've been talking about? And how can you know, people just be able to be part of your world and hear more from you?
Yeah, thanks so much. So the book's The Golden Quest, and you can find it on Amazon. You can also request it in bookstores. And my website, everything's based around this concept of the awesome stuff. So the website's theawesomestuff.com. You can find me on TikTok or Instagram at theawesomestuff. And so anything around the awesome stuff, that's going to be me. Otherwise, if you want to request the book, you can buy it on the website, but also, like I said, bookstores, Amazon, and it's called The Golden Quest, and it's a graphic novel. It's targeted towards kids probably around 5 to 12, but as I mentioned, the lessons in there are for adults, so I'd love to see it for, high school grads and early 20s going on their first job. Like, it really is a great book for anyone who just wants to learn basic habits and mindset around money.
And I think that people, being able to give this as a gift even would be wonderful. So if people are interested and you want to give it as a birthday gift or something, it would be a cool thing. I love to give books as birthday gifts for little kids. Being the like cool auntie that I am, I give books, right? and kids actually enjoy them. Like, I'm that nerdy aunt who's like, here's a book, kid, and they're like, oh, cool. And so, that's one of my things that I like to do. So if you are interested in David's book and you want to order it online, you heard it first. It's on Amazon, it's on his website, which is also the awesome stuff everywhere you can find him. And you do speaking too, right? You're speaking about the book now.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm trying to do more and more speaking, get this message out, and really just encourage conversations around money. So the number one thing is just having the conversations itself as a family. So speaking about it, and I'm actually, it hasn't been announced yet, but we're working on a conference for families for around this time next year, where families can come and learn about money in this sort of fun environment where we're going to basically gamify the whole environment, give families money, and they can play this game and learn about money at this conference. So.
Oh, that's cool. So in person. Oh no, this is the post-pandemic era. We're like, oh my God, something in person? Like, it seems so rare. So
yeah, in person, they can interact. And the beauty of it, what I'm really hoping is you'd come with the multi-generation as well. So parents will come with their kids, but also their parents. So you'll have the 3 generations of people there as a family, and then you can interact. So you can make choices, and your decisions are going to impact how much money you make or earn in this game, and make those decisions as a family. And then at the end, every family will have so much money that they've accumulated during the game, and see how they rank up and how it went for them and lessons they learned. So
that's a really cool concept. I love it. Oh, I can't wait to see when that comes out. So, well, thank you so much for being here and for being part of the podcast. We super appreciate it. And this has been the Social Impact Level Up podcast. We've been here with David Delisle. We're talking about the awesome stuff and his book, The Golden Quest, and how you can connect with him is on any social media platform looking for the awesome stuff. And this is Wendy V. We are here with the Social Impact Level Up Collective. I'm always looking for people to come and join our community as well, and you can find us on any social media platform. All right, thanks, David, for being here. It's wonderful to have you. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. It's been awesome to interview today's guest, and I hope that you leave inspired to take action. If you're looking for any of the information we spoke about, it's probably down in the show notes. Make sure that you're checking them out and you're clicking on any of the links that seem exciting to you. If you are looking for a coach or a consultant to help you with your social impact or your sustainability, reach out to me via my website, hop on my email list, or jump into one of my programs. All of the links are below. So excited to have you as part of the collective. Make sure that you come back and join us for another episode next week.